Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Hopefully, you guys are off having a great Monday morning. I'm really running late today. No big surprise there, right? I don't know if I'm ever going to be on time, and I even get up really early to try to be on time, and yet I'm still running late. Seems like the story of my life. But you know what? That's because there's always news coming through. It's like as I'm writing my notes, I'm like, oh, there's another story. There's another story. There's just so much going on as it is these days, every day, all day, new news stories. Hopefully, you guys all had a good weekend. Good morning, Genevieve. Good morning, Karen. Oh, look at you, Genevieve, on spring break. And you get to watch live. Well, thank you for watching at all. I definitely do appreciate it, especially on such a beautiful Monday morning. We're still going to have a couple of cool ish days, but you know what? Warm weather is ahead. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Good morning, Linda. You guys saw that photo, that painting. Good morning, Tammy Jerry Hoover, of Donald Trump. Well, he hates that painting. He hates it. And it's so funny. Here's a statement, and I get it because I hate photos of myself. How I get up and stand in front of this camera for this podcast, I do not know, but I hate looking at myself, so I get it. So this is what Donald Trump said. He said, "Nobody likes a bad picture or painting of themselves, but the one in Colorado in the state capitol, put up by the governor, along with all other presidents, was purposefully distorted to a level that even I perhaps have never seen before. The artist also did President Obama, and he looks wonderful, but the one on me is truly the worst. She must have lost her talent as she got older. In any event, I would much prefer not having a picture than having this one, but many people from Colorado have called and written to complain. In fact, they are actually angry about it. I am speaking on their behalf to the radical left governor, Jared Polis, who is extremely weak on crime, in particular with respect to Tren de Aragua, which practically took over Aurora, Colorado. Don't worry. Take it down. Jared should be ashamed of himself. I think that's so funny. I'm going to show you the painting again. And you know, I get it. I don't think it's too bad, but Donald Trump absolutely despises it. Here it is. And I mean, it doesn't really look like himself. I understand why he maybe wouldn't want the world to see this painting. Thankfully, it's only in Colorado, and unfortunately, a lot more people saw it because he called attention to it. But yeah, if you look at it, like the jaw area doesn't look quite right. I think President Trump is much more handsome than he is portrayed in that painting. But I get it. Trust me. I absolutely do get it. I do not like photos of myself at all. Anyone who knows me knows when I go out, I try to back out of photos. I can't stand it. And that's why you never very rarely see selfies of me because I just don't like photos. I think a lot of us are that way, aren't we? We don't like photos of ourselves. Some of the things I want to talk about today, there's a lot going on as usual. Lots going on, lots of crazy stuff in the news. I'm going to show you a funny video later. There's a Arab country who believes that George Floyd is still alive and he's fighting for Russia against Ukraine. It's kind of funny that something like this would make the news, you know, in another country. I think it's absolutely here, and I don't even think the guy looks like George Floyd. But hey, what you know what? Stranger things have happened. You never know. Some new accusations in the P Diddy case. This one's pretty interesting. Accusing a former captain of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department of kidnapping two P Diddy victims. And we're definitely going to get into that. It's pretty interesting, the ties, because this police captain in Las Vegas was there and gave a press conference over, remember the shooting that took place at the country concert? And then later moved and became the chief over in Maui, Hawaii. And guess what? Gave a press conference on the missing children from the Lahaina fire. So interesting tie between some of these cases. Well, we're definitely going to get into that. Good morning, Dottie. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Scott. And hope you guys are all having a good morning. And so there's lots to talk about. Of course, Putin talking about praying for Donald Trump, which I thought was such a sweet gesture, sweet things to say. Let's see. Abe, did you all see Trump at the NCAA Wrestling Championship on Saturday? I did see it. I did see it. I didn't save the video for it, but I did see it. The crowd absolutely went crazy, which was amazing. So I just want to remind everybody there will be no show tomorrow, as you guys probably know if you've been following along with the show. I have my PET scan tomorrow morning. I have to be there at 9 a.m. and hopefully with good results. I'm not too worried about it. I'm really just ready to get it over with. And then I will be back on Wednesday with Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard. Can't wait to talk to him on Wednesday because there's probably going to be a lot of things that unfold between now and Wednesday that we'll be talking to Colonel Joe Adams about because the world is crazy. It never ends. There's so much going on all across the world. Good morning, Robert. They're having these massive uprisings. I'm not sure if you guys saw this in Turkey. And these are happening in Serbia. They're all over the world. And people, I think, have finally just had enough of some of these leaders. And, you know, President Erdogan in Turkey is no different. He's supposed to be a member of NATO, but he actually fights against NATO, which isn't too crazy of a thing. But then he's over in Syria, fighting the Kurds and all these different things are going on. And what's really crazy about Erdogan is it's his people, just like all these other leaders. It's the people that suffer. And with Erdogan, if you remember, he created a safe space for ISIS. When we, the United States and Russia, were in Iran, were in Syria fighting against ISIS, the three unlikely allies in that fight against ISIS in Syria. Well, guess what happened? They created a safe passage. They didn't imprison ISIS. They didn't kill them. They allowed safe passage into Turkey, and of course, it's just destroying the country of Turkey. And I'm going to show you just a very brief clip of some of the uprisings there because it's growing larger by the day. What you see there is police spraying tear gas on the protesters. But if you go out there and you look at world news, there's protests going on all across the world. It's happening in Brazil. It's happening in Serbia. It's happening in all of these different countries because people have had enough. They have had enough. I was thinking about this over the weekend that remember, the United States under the Democrat regime, we instilled a lot of puppet governments all across the world. And the people, of course, they've always known, and the people have had enough of it. They are ready to be done with these puppet governments that we, the United States, instilled because of those governments, they do nothing but harm the people. And now that they see that we finally have our freedom, and I don't even know how many people really see it that way, that we do finally have our freedom. I feel it. I really do. I feel it every single day that we have our freedom back. Maybe not on Facebook, but everywhere else, we got our freedom back. And in these other countries, they see it. They see what we're doing. They see what Donald Trump is doing and Elon Musk is doing. Of course, Elon paying a heavy price as people are continuing to set Teslas on fire. But you know what? That's just an intimidation tactic, isn't it? But we're going to see more of these countries, more of these people rise up against their governments because they have to. They're fighting for their own freedom and their own life. And some of these countries, I mean, I don't have to tell you because we've talked about it too many times, is that before the United States gets involved, people are, in their country, they're living a free life, very much like we did and have. And you don't see people in black burqas prior to the United States getting involved. Then all of a sudden, the United States government, we take over, we instill our puppet government. And then the next thing you know, women lose their rights. Everybody's running around in black burqas. And that's us. We did that to these people. So no wonder they hate us. Good morning, Stephen. And so and speaking of the Teslas, Pam Bondi spoke out, this past weekend about exactly that. I'm not going to play the video of her right now, but she has again threatened these people that if you're going to commit these crimes in our country, you're going to be held responsible, calling again for 20 plus year sentences on domestic terrorism to these people. But it's just an intimidation tactic because government, the Democrats, that is, they're upset We won. We've got the upper hand, and they don't like it. Their judicial coup isn't working. Donald Trump is still continuing to push forward, particularly with deportations, and they don't like it. They don't like what Elon Musk is doing. And these are paid. This is all paid. These are not just regular people. Now, some people are regular people and angry and going out and lighting fires to Teslas and scratching Teslas. But a lot of the stuff we see are also paid agitators. They're paid. And people like Soros and these other groups pay them. And why? Because they want to cause chaos. They want to cause disruption. They want to intimidate the rest of us. And we just cannot fall for it. And it's really a shame because they're really just attacking their own people. I mean, Tesla, before, Elon Musk was a Democrat. I think you guys all know that. And at one time, I would have almost considered him a liberal. And he supported Democrat causes. He gave money to the Democrat Party. And at the time when Tesla was first evolving, he was very much a Democrat. And a lot of Democrats bought those Teslas. You don't really see a lot of conservatives running around driving electric cars or Teslas. Some, but not many. Most of them are still liberal Democrats. So they're really just burning their own cars, which you got to find a little bit of humor in that, really. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. These people have lost their minds. Margie, found you on X, but not seeing you on the feed. Oh, no. Well, Margie, that could be because I got started a little bit late. I didn't even put the show up until like the last minute. That should be the first thing I do when I get up in the morning. But there's so much news coming in, literally down to the wire, that I wait until the end. And a lot of people, of course, miss the notification. I need to start doing things a little bit different, having like a news cutoff is what I need to do. But again, so much going on. Something I thought was pretty interesting that I want to talk about is that there's a guy he's the police chief over in Maui, John Pelletier. You guys may or may not have heard of him. I've heard his name before, never in the way that I have. But I think we all know, the shooting that took place in Las Vegas. When they were having that country music festival, we all knew something was really strange there. And I'm not blaming it on this guy, John Pelletier. I'm not blaming him, but I remember him from the news conferences. And I remember different things going on, in his name coming up, not in any particular context, but I don't think many of us trusted that situation. And he was the police captain there for 22 years for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And then he left that position and he ended up going to Hawaii and he became the mayor of Maui. I mean, the mayor, good Lord, I'm losing my mind. The police chief at the police chief of Maui. And then he gave a press conference about the fires in Lahaina, talking about I think it was 850 missing children. Well, now, guess what? His name has come into the spotlight again, part of a lawsuit, in the P Diddy case, where there are two victims who claim that John Pelletier was in Las Vegas, that these two females were victims of a gang situation. I got to be careful with my wording so they don't take the show down. Of a gang situation, you can use your imagination to imagine what that would be with P Diddy. They're in Las Vegas, and that John Pelletier, as the captain of the Las Vegas Police Department, kidnapped these two women, and he took them to his home and held them captive, and then tried to cover the kidnapping charges. He ended up taking them to P Diddy's residence where they were victimized again. And it's kind of an interesting story, and it's a really crazy, weird story. And I'm not saying this guy is involved in the shooting that took place, the mass shooting in Las Vegas, or that he was involved in the Lahaina fires. It's just such a strange coincidence. And I came across this video that kind of put it all together. So I'm going to show you this quick clip. I'm not sure who this TikToker is that put this video together. You might know who he is. I don't. Good morning, Karen. But it's a pretty interesting coincidence that he's involved in these different situations.
Maui County Mayor Richard Bisson is calling for the police chief, John Pelletier, to be on leave after he was named in a lawsuit tying him to Hollywood celebrity Sean Diddy Combs.
But wait a second. isn't that guy also the same guy that was in?
My name is John Pelletier. I'm a captain with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
But wait, there's more. No, there's still more.
That is possible. That's what we're sharing here internally. That is possible that there will be many children.
You can't make this up, man.
I oversee the Major Violator and Narcotics Bureau.
Former Metro Police Captain is refuting claims that he was involved in a cover-up related to Sean Diddy Combs. In a criminal complaint, it alleges that current Maui Police Chief John Pelletier was hired to provide security for Combs back in 2018. It claims Pelletier posed as a sheriff's deputy in California to respond to an alleged gang rape involving Combs. The complaint also claims all defendants directly committed violations of aiding, abetting, and inducing the sex trafficking venture and sex trafficking of plaintiffs in this suit.
We had Jim look back at his history here with the department. Shows that he was actually praised for his dedication to sexual assault prevention, which may be surprising for some given the allegations of this lawsuit.
So let me see if I got this straight. The same guy that was the commanding officer at the time of the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, which to this day is extremely hard to explain and doesn't make any sense at all for a mountain of reasons that I can't go into because it would make the video way too long. Clearly seems to be a very manufactured event. That same commander is also the guy who was in charge when Maui gets hit with the biggest wildfire in history and tons of kids go missing randomly. And then coincidentally, he now gets named in the Diddy case as somebody who, while he was in Vegas, was over the Major Violator and Narcotics Bureau in Las Vegas, and that he was there for more than 22 years and is being named in the case with Diddy.
Pretty strange stuff, isn't it? So the report that I read states that there was a gang situation going on. He said the word. I'm not going to get pulled if I say the word. And in Las Vegas, and John Pelletier, being the captain of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, responded to that call. And allegedly it was a neighbor that called and that he showed up. These two girls claim he gave an envelope of cash to a neighbor. He kidnapped these two victims, took them to California to P Diddy's home, and where they were held and further victimized. Now, is it true? Is it not true? It's a civil case. It's not a criminal case. And as you guys know, anyone can file a civil case. I mean, I could pick somebody off the comment line and say that they kidnapped me and held me and did all this crazy stuff. That doesn't make it true. It's just a civil case. So they're, looking for compensation. So is it true? Is it not true? Did they just pull this guy's name out of a hat? How did they come up with this guy? And it's so strange and probably just crazy coincidental that he happened to be there, giving the press conference for that Las Vegas shooting in 2017 and giving the press conference for the Lahaina fires. And, some people could take it a little bit further down the rabbit hole and they could say, well, those were incidents in which, something related to P Diddy was being covered up. And I think that's really far-fetched, quite honestly. Now, of course, I tend to think of things in more modest terms, but you guys might think, oh, that makes perfect sense to me. But I don't know. It's awfully strange, and I think you guys know that sometimes there are incidences that happen that are used to cover other crimes. And there are incidents that happen in a way to obtain victims. We all know in times of war, guess what happens? Children go missing and they end up being trafficked. There's no question about it. It's been happening in Ukraine. It's been reported on for quite some time now that throughout all this fighting in Ukraine, what has resulted is a lot of children have ended up disappearing. We don't know where they're at. Some are found, having been trafficked. And that happens in almost every wartime scenario. And it's not those kids have never really been identified. I've checked on it here and there because people ask. Some have been accounted for, some haven't, and there's really no answers. But that fire in Lahaina was so severe that there are still people that are missing, that they either presumed jumped into the ocean to escape or were burned just beyond finding, in some of these homes or wherever in Lahaina. But no one's ever really talked about it. And so it does kind of make you wonder, is it connected? Is it not connected? I'm going to side that with it, it's probably not connected. But I do think it's kind of strange that this John Pelletier was the police captain for 22 years. That's a really long time, 22 years with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And then he left that job and then went all the way out to Hawaii. Now, I can't say I blame him. If I were in any position to move to Hawaii and continue to work, maybe I would do the same thing. So there's a lot of coincidences there, but I can't really say there's any smoking gun except for the fact that these two girls named him. I mean, did they just pull that name out of a hat? I just don't understand how his name came into the mix. And of course, he claims that it didn't happen. He can prove it didn't happen. He was never in California during that time period when they say it happened. And, I don't know. We'll see. It's not a criminal case. So it's not like anyone is looking to place charges against him. Now, that could come later. Of course, it could come later. But, it's like when it comes to P Diddy, I don't think anything's off the table because we've heard these crazy stories where he used, millions of dollars to potentially bribe people into doing things. He had police, there were police officers that were covering up for him. We know this was the case. There's attorneys covering up for him. I largely support, all first responders, particularly police officers. But we all know there's a couple bad apples out there. So is this the guy that's the bad apple? And he was covering up, for P. Diddy's crimes. It's possible P. Diddy was paying him money to cover it up. There's a lot of police officers who work secondary security for different celebrities and different things. Maybe they met in that way. That's just me, guessing. I certainly don't know. Good morning, Glesna, from the snowy Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Oh, I hate to hear about snow. Good morning, Phyllis, and good morning, Annette. So those are something to think about. I don't know if we'll ever see that back in the news or hear too much more about it. But eventually we're going to hear all of the details of the P. Diddy case. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a while because there's a lot of ins and outs that they're working between different people, a lot of high level named people within these cases, a lot of victims. I mean, I almost think there's going to be that P. Diddy's going to have more victims than Epstein did. Allegedly Epstein had about 250 victims. And that's probably on the slight side. I would expect it probably to be more, but they only know the victims who have come forward. So if there's been people victimized who never came forward, of course, those names aren't going to be listed. But I really think that this P. Diddy situation is going to be much higher because not only do we have these bigger names that we've heard and we know about, but think about all the people who attended his parties, people he met here or there, his friends and other people met and brought to these parties who are also victimized, and these people are probably too scared to speak up. So I do think in the end of things that the situation with P. Diddy is going to be far bigger than the situation with Epstein, and probably a lot of the same names you might hear between the two, a lot of the same names. Good morning, Brian. We'll never hear all the details. Brian, you're right. We'll never hear the details of what happened with P. Diddy, not all of them. And we won't with Epstein either, because what's happening with Epstein? Nothing. They're saying, oh, we're just redacting names, and they're still looking through the files, and they're still looking at. I've heard this weird comment over the weekend, and I wish I could remember who said it. I didn't save it, but they said, well, it's better to take our time and take a look at the people who are still alive in the Epstein case, versus the clients that are gone. So I'm like, I'm so confused by that statement. Is there a large number of Epstein clients that aren't around anymore? And if not, what happened to them? And, who are they? And then, of course, there are still the ones that are alive. Are we going to ever prosecute or hold those people accountable? And if we do, that could take a little bit longer to present all of the information on the Epstein case. But I'm kind of like Brian. I kind of feel like we're never really going to know the truth of what's happening. That and yes, I think we deserve to know the truth, but I don't think we ever will learn the truth. We probably won't learn the truth about a lot of things, quite honestly. But something, speaking of though, the files that are going through, I tried to take some time out this weekend. I had to work all weekend, tried to take a little time out to look at the JFK files. And I thought there was a couple of interesting things. I haven't really seen anything yet in those files, and you probably haven't either, that we didn't already know, or at least, suspect were the case. And I played a video for you guys last week, and I played it, I don't know, several weeks before that, about Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, and how he was behind the plot to kill John Kennedy. And I thought it was kind of interesting, where I read a little article over the weekend where allegedly Jackie had told John Kennedy Jr. that LBJ was the one who hired the hit against his father. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I came across this call, and this call between LBJ and Jackie Kennedy is a really weird call. I'm going to play it for you. You may have, I don't know if you've seen it out there or not. It's a really weird call. And then I'm going to talk about a little connection between Marilyn Monroe and John Kennedy, because, over the years, there's been so much speculation. Did John Kennedy order, the kind of an assassination against Marilyn Monroe, because she was going to talk and was pushing him to do things that he didn't want to do? So I'm going to talk about that connection as well. So there are some little things coming out in these files that no smoking guns, nothing that say, well, this is definitely for sure what happened, but definitely some things to lead us down a certain path. And Ray, good morning, Ray. Let Doge participate in these cases. Now, wouldn't that be nice? Let's just hand over all the cases to Elon Musk. We'd know everything tomorrow, wouldn't we? And Jay, just resign yourself to the fact it's going to be just like Epstein. Jay, you're probably right. I think they're just dangling a lot of things in front of us. Oh, the JFK files. There's no answers in the JFK files. There's nothing. There's more speculation. It leads us down the same path we've been down all of these years. We've always suspected that it was the CIA. Now, I didn't really suspect that it was LBJ behind the order to the CIA, until, I don't know, 6 months or so ago. But I mean, still, there's nothing in these files that said that's exactly what's happened. But I want to play this call for you, because this is a strange call, in my opinion. And I'm guessing that this call took place before she realized that LBJ was behind. Oh my gosh, I don't see it on here. It's got to be here somewhere. Let me find it.
Hello?
Hello?
Jackie?
Mr. President?
I love you.
Oh, I see, sweet. Where are you?
You just skipped away from this town. I ought to have had you arrested.
But I was so mad at myself.
Yeah, well, you ought to be mad. You almost made me mad at you, leaving without coming by and hugging me and telling me goodbye.
Yeah, but did you get my note?
Yes, I did. And
I talked to ladies, but I thought so stupid.
Well, I miss you, and I'm thinking of you, and I know your Christmas won't be what it ought to be, but I wish that I could make it happier. When I got ready to go to home for my Christmas, the Congress just said they'd spank me and hit me right in the face and wouldn't let me go, and that's the way I want to do you next time if you don't tell me goodbye.
Oh, listen, as soon as you get back, I'll come and get a vitamin D shot from Dr. Travell.
Won't you do that?
See you.
Won't you do that?
Yeah.
Thank you, honey.
Isn't that a strange call? Am I the only person that think that's strange? I think that's like one of the weirdest calls I've ever heard. And this call took place between LBJ and Jackie Kennedy about 1 month after John Kennedy was assassinated. And I'm guessing that at that time, she hadn't yet realized that he was potentially the one behind that assassination. I don't think she would have been quite so friendly. And Annette, LBJ was a huge womanizer. I have heard that. Robert says weird. I think that's a really weird call. I mean, he's talking about Congress spanking him. Now, I don't think that maybe, I don't know, was he mean it in a flirty way? Was he not? I don't know. But I thought it was a really weird call. But what I thought was interesting is Jackie's talking about going to this Dr. Travell to get her vitamin B shot. Now, there's another doctor. This came out through, some of these files. I don't know if you guys heard this or not. His name was Dr. Jacobson. And how now you can go and get these IVs and these different things. I know plenty of people who've had a heavy night out drinking. They go and get this IV infusion of these different liquids and things that replenish you, take you out of that stage of dehydration and make you feel a little bit better. Well, that's been going on for a really long time. What I think is interesting, this Dr. Jacobson, he had a lot of very famous clients, and amongst those, which is kind of interesting, the connection, and the Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, Leonard Bernstein, Judy Garland, Humphrey Bogart, Elizabeth Taylor, Cecil B. DeMille, Liza Minnelli, Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, Rod Sterling, that's the person who created Twilight Zone, if you don't know who he is, and Nelson Rockefeller. So these were all patients of Dr. Jacobson. And amongst those, of course, would be John Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy. And what he would do is he would go around and give them these injections. It was supposed to make them feel better. And it turned out to be just this crazy, crazy mix of stuff. And I was reading a story about John Kennedy prior to becoming president, and how he had this episode where he got in one of these shots and he was running naked, through the halls of this hotel. And of course, back then it was a lot easier, to keep things quiet than it is now, where cameras are everywhere and phones are everywhere. Social media spreads the news faster than anyone can imagine. But I'm going to read you the ingredient list to this IV infusion that was given to all of these different people, clients of Dr. Jacobson. This is some weird stuff. It was a mix, okay? Methamphetamine, think about that. So they were high on meth. 28 milligrams of methamphetamine went into this IV. And there was vitamins and steroids, human placenta, animal organs, as an example, monkey gonads and sheep sperm. Yes. Opioid painkillers, barbiturates, and testosterone. So this Dr. Jacobson had this cocktail, and he mixed all of these things together. And this is what he was giving through IV infusions to all of these different celebrities, plus John and Jackie Kennedy. And it caused them to have a lot of weird episodes, a lot of weird things going on. And so I was thinking about it, it is interesting which of course this Dr. Jacobson had a lot of different patients. So maybe or maybe not coincidental that he treated both John Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe. So it does kind of make you wonder, did this Dr. Jacobson give her some type of cocktail that led to her death? Because there were so many people over the years, such mystery as to how she died. And of course, people all these years have blamed it on John Kennedy and said he ordered this to be. And then then you see this connection with this doctor, that they shared this same doctor who gave them this crazy, crazy cocktail of things, or was she just depressed and ended her life? If you go back and look at those files, a lot of people say that she would have never done something like that just was not her, that she was not despondent, that she was, living a pretty good life, even though she was taking pills and drinking alcohol and things like that. It's pretty interesting. Glesna says, it's a vaccine. It sure sounds like one. Could you imagine taking a cocktail of that every morning? Good gosh. Dottie, that would pick your head up a zoom. You better believe it. Kim, good morning, Kim. And that says a flirty pig about LBJ. Yeah, I have no respect for that man at all. Not at all. And of course, a lot of these files go back to say that LBJ may have received a pretty good kickback. Now, we don't know this. There's no way to prove it, from Israel, because Israel at the time, they wanted nuclear weapons. John Kennedy wouldn't give them nuclear weapons. He said, nope, not going to happen. You're not allowed to have them. He's out of the picture. LBJ steps in, and guess what? One of the first things that happens, Israel gets their nuclear weapons. And I'm not blaming it on Israel by any means. I'm blaming it on LBJ, because he may or may not have made a pretty good deal. We know now how the government works, don't we? It's all about good deals. And speaking of good deals, I don't know if you guys heard this or not. I almost forgot about it, quite honestly, till just now. And I haven't really read too much about it. I don't know where all of these accusations are coming from. But I keep calling him Colonel Douglas McGregor, who I have so much respect for, he posted on X this weekend that Obama has been caught red-handed creating shell companies and taking aid that was meant to go to foreign countries and looping that money through his accounts over in the Caribbean. Now, is this true or is it not true? And I haven't been able to do the deep dive on that yet. See, I wouldn't be surprised. We've talked many times on the show about how Obama, here he was a young senator coming up from Chicago, which we're not even going to get into the fact that absolutely no one knew who he was. He taught but didn't have any students. He grew up in the United States, but yet had no friends. No one had a clue who he was until all of a sudden, nope, here he is, involved in politics as an adult, but no record of him before that. We're not even going to get into that craziness today. But what's interesting about it is that, he's worth about $135 million now. Now, he didn't earn $135 million on his $400,000 a year presidential salary. He certainly didn't, have that much money on speaking engagements. So where did he come up with that money? And where is the proof that he was truly, let's just put it out, it's stealing, it's theft, that he was taking money, signing it off to these other countries through, you said, and all of a sudden it's really just looping back into his own bank account. That's a pretty heavy accusation by Colonel McGregor. And I'll tell you what, I trust Colonel McGregor. And if Colonel McGregor is saying that Obama was stealing money from Americans through the shell company and through, money laundering type situation in the Caribbean, then you know what? I believe it. I absolutely do believe it. I think that Obama's been very lucky that he's been out of the spotlight for as long as he has, because I've always thought that was really weird that you hear no mention of Obama at all. No one ties him to anything. Here we have Joe Biden, his vice president, and all his shenanigans, through Ukraine in 2014 under Obama's watch, and you hear nothing about it. No ties to Obama, and we know that's not true. Todd says, I think Hollywood is getting those IVs. Somebody is. I'll tell you, that's some crazy stuff going into that IV. Annette, shaking my head once again, nothing will be done. No, nothing will be done. That's the key right there. Nothing will be done. You're absolutely right. Margie, the recipe from the old sisters on the Waltons. I'll tell you, and I know back then there were some weird things. My grandma used to get a shot that her mother had received before her. They had a doctor, and this doctor, an old country doctor, he would come around and give them all this shot, and he would perk them up. But it was like B vitamins. It was this weird mixture of B vitamins, and my grandma would go and get those shots. And I'll tell you what, you could tell if she did or did not have her shot. Now, maybe there was a secret ingredient in there we don't know about, but she got pretty loopy when she wasn't getting her vitamin shots. And so that back then they just did things differently. But this recipe that he was giving them, what a crazy mix that was, isn't it? What a crazy mix. And so, as you guys probably know, of course, Donald Trump took away the security clearance for a lot of folks this weekend. I feel like that's kind of how they're getting people. We're probably not going to see Hillary go to prison. We're probably not going to see Joe Biden go to prison, but they're going to lose their security clearance. And I can understand that's really actually a bigger deal than you might think. Because if they lose their security clearance, then they're not allowed to work out a lot of these underhanded deals. Just because they're not in the mix anymore doesn't mean they're still not working out deals. It's going to be a lot harder to do without a security clearance. And so here's some of the security clearances. This is a direct statement here. It says, I have determined that it is to no longer that let me start over. I have determined that it is no longer in the national interest for the following individuals to access classified information: Antony Blinken, Jacob Sullivan, Lisa Monaco, Mark Zed, Norman Eisen, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, Andrew Weissman, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Cheney, Kamala Harris, Adam Kinzinger, I love that one, Fiona Hill, Alexander Vindman, Joseph R. Biden Jr., and any other member of the Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s family. Therefore, I hereby direct every executive department and agency head to take all additional action as necessary and consistent with exiting law to revoke any active security clearances held by these individuals. So What do you think about that? Now, that came directly from Donald Trump's office. He is rescinding the security clearance for these individuals. Pretty interesting, isn't it? That was a pretty long line. Patty says B12. Yeah, B12, B1, thiamine. My grandma had all kinds of stuff in hers. But I'll tell you what, that's a lot of names on that list. And I love it about Adam. I can't stand Adam Kinzinger. I'm so glad that he is on this list because that little idiot, I wish they would just get him out of the system altogether. He is nothing but a traitor. His own family doesn't even like him, which is even funnier. But now Joe Biden himself, the problem with him, he's probably not actively doing anything with a security clearance, but we can't trust him to not let his family use his credentials because somebody who's involved in crime to the extent the Biden family is, they're not going to just stop. They're just money hungry. They're just going to keep doing what they can to build wealth, and of course, selling us all out in the process. Todd says if they're not in office, there's no reason to have them have clearance. I agree, Todd. Why does Hillary Clinton have security clearance anyway? That was the first thing I thought when I read this. I'm like, why would Hillary Clinton even have a security clearance? Why would Kamala Harris need a security clearance right now? Now, of course, that being said, there's a lot of people out there in the country who have absolutely nothing to do with the government who have a security clearance because they're doing jobs in those different sectors where they need a security clearance to do those jobs. But these people aren't doing those kind of jobs. There's absolutely no reason for Joe Biden or any member. Why would members of his family have a security clearance anyway? Who in the Joe Biden family has a security clearance? Hunter, Ashley, his brother. What's his brother's name? James? I can't even remember. So the big guy, Peter, has lost his security clearance. And whose name, though, was not on this list? Barack Obama. Did you notice that? He hasn't lost his security clearance. I really do think, this is just me saying this, I really do think that they're scared of him. I think that Elon Musk, I think that Donald Trump, I think that a good portion of the government, I think they're scared of Barack Obama. I don't really know why. Maybe they realize if they uncovered that corruption that something would happen to them. You guys remember that interview that Elon Musk gave to Joe Rogan where he said, if I really talked about all the things I've uncovered, they'd kill me. Who's they? Maybe it's Barack Obama. I do still believe he is a CIA operative named Renegade. And we talked about that on a couple of different shows. So I'm not going to get into that today. But it does make you wonder, why didn't Trump rescind Obama's security clearance? Why does Obama need a security clearance? Does Michelle have one also? Does anyone else, related to some of these people? It's really strange, in my opinion, that now that Donald Trump is president, we hear absolutely nothing about Obama. Absolutely nothing. Now Colonel Douglas McGregor talking about Obama, money laundering out in the Caribbean with these different accounts. We're going to see what happens to Colonel McGregor. Will he be around with us too much longer? We'll find out. But I think they're scared of Obama. I don't know who Obama is. I really think that Obama was set to be the leader of the one world government when they got all of that lined out and put together. I think he knew he was going to be the leader. That was always his goal. And then, of course, we put a big kibosh to that plan, and now that's not going to happen. They'll go back to it, though. They have their 30-year plan. This is probably just a little bump in the road, so they'll probably get right back to it as soon as they can figure out how to get rid of Donald Trump. Todd says the machine, look at Boeing, started developing land at the airport 2 years before they got this latest deal. Oh, yeah, they probably for sure knew what was going on. No question about it. And I'm glad, they're doing that. What is it? Is it an F-47? Was that the name of their new plane that they're working on over there, which looks absolutely amazing, by the way, which is great. That gives a lot of people here in the St. Louis area a lot of work that they so desperately need. And we need a new fighter jet. We're falling behind under Joe Biden. We weren't really doing all the things we needed to do to keep up with our military. So I'm glad to hear there's something new going on. But I thought it was pretty interesting to see the revocation of those security clearances. Little Hillary Clinton's probably sitting at home, boohooing and crying. But, Bill Clinton wasn't on that list. Did you notice that? So does he still have his security clearance? Does he not? Maybe he lost it a long time ago. But there's a lot of people not on some of these lists that I really wonder why they're not on the list. F-47, thank you so much for that. I was reading quite a bit about it over the weekend, and it looks absolutely beautiful. I almost posted a photo of it. I'll probably do that on social media later. Anyway, lots more things going on. Here's something else that I heard that I think is absolutely fantastic, and that is, along with the tearing apart of the Department of Education, what came from that? Good things, right? Now we have the HHS, Robert Kennedy Jr., who is going to be combing through the school lunch program, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I think Todd says Gen 6 alien technology for sure. I hope so. We need to use some of that alien technology. So Robert Kennedy Jr. going to head up with the HHS, the school lunch program, as well as the special needs program. To me, some people might say, well, why those two? I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Two departments in which the Department of Education completely failed. I'm going to play Donald Trump's statement here very quickly, and then we're going to talk about that for a minute.
Bobby Kennedy, the Health and Human Services, will be handling special needs and all of the nutrition programs and everything else. Rather complex, but that's going to be headed by and handled by Health and Human Services. So I think that'll work out very well. Those two elements will be taken out of the Department of Education, and then all we have to do is get the students to get guidance from the people that love them and cherish them, including their parents, by the way, who will be totally involved in their education along with the boards and the governors and the states. And it's going to be a great situation, I guess.
I think that's a fantastic situation because remember when Michelle Obama took over the school lunches and they were, I've looked at so many pictures of the school lunches under Michelle Obama. It hasn't really been revamped that much since then. And it's atrocious what these kids were being forced to eat at school. And what was happening is kids just weren't eating. The food that they put out was just disgusting. It was really, truly disgusting. If somebody pushed that in front of me, I wouldn't want it either. So we're going to see, I think that's going to change a lot of things. Is it possible that the HHS will now require schools to serve kids nutritious lunches that don't have food dyes, that don't have chemicals or antibiotics? I think that's a really good possibility. And how that ties to the special needs program. Now, certainly not all special needs with diet make a difference but there are a lot of people who believe that diet and certain special needs are very much tied together, particularly, like hyperactivity disorders and even autism to some degree, they say can be affected by diet. And it really makes me wonder with HHS in charge of school lunches, with the food program altogether at school, how many changes are they going to make? And is it also going to affect some of these kids in the special needs classes who maybe have situations that are exacerbated by the foods that they're eating, by these dyes and chemicals? It'll be very interesting to see. Karen, I had no idea. Karen says, I am a lunch lady and you would be sick to see what we serve. Karen, I had a show one time, I don't know, a couple years ago where I was showing photos of our American school lunches compared to the school lunches in other countries. And oh my gosh, it's atrocious. Here, you would think here in the United States that we would be serving these really fantastic school lunches for kids. And it is just not the case. It's just not the case. So Karen, I am sure you, like us, will be happy for the HHS department to take over the school lunch program or school food program altogether, because we really need to see, where does it start? It should start with the kids, right? Some of us, it's too late. Some of us, it's too late. We've already eaten a lot of junk. It's already in our system. Never too late to start, of course, but starting with the kids is certainly a great option. And I think it'd be really fantastic if they, if Michelle Obama could control the school lunch program to the degree that she did, completely changing what kids have at school for lunch, then I know that Robert Kennedy Jr. can just come in and just change all of it Get those food dyes out, get those chemicals out, all those antibiotics, no fake meat, no soy. How about we just put all the good stuff in? That's what we need. And Margie says, yes, skip lunch. Todd says, I was always excited for a square of pizza at school. Yeah, pizza, that old school pizza was probably the most popular stuff, wasn't it? The pizza burgers. Jay says, when we were kids, the lunches were often homemade recipes and made from real ingredients. Yeah, because you can go out now and get the cookbook that they used to use at the schools. And, and it was made with actual ingredients, tomatoes, sausage, bread, regular bread that they actually cooked the bread. I've read the ingredients of the bread they cooked. It was very, very different back in the day. Brenda, he's perfect to take over special needs. I couldn't agree more, Brenda. I could not agree more. And I think that the HHS being ran by Robert Kennedy Jr. is just going to go leaps and bounds ahead from where they have been. I hate to say it, but a lot of the kids in these special needs programs, look how many just in the St. Louis area have been sexually assaulted at schools. I mean, that's, out of the realm of HHS. But just think about that. It happened right here in the St. Louis area. We know it did. We've talked about it, and it's horrendous. And if it's happening in St. Louis, it's happening everywhere. But more importantly, I think that Robert Kennedy Jr. understands. He understands that kids with special needs need special care. And I really think he's going to step it up for these kids who really deserve it and who really need it the most, and just affecting school lunches altogether. And I'm very, very excited. When I heard that, I'm like, oh, that's excellent. And I missed a couple of comments here. And let's see, Jay says, I'm not sure this idea is good, especially for the blue states like Illinois. Are you talking about the school lunch program? I'm assuming. Yeah, who knows what they're going to do in the state of Illinois. Todd says, yes, a lot of you can tell it's Monday. A lot of personal property tax money goes to special school districts here locally. And Brenda says, I am a teacher. Kids throw much of it away. Yes, of course they do. Of course they do. I wouldn't want to eat that stuff that Michelle Obama put out, though, those old stale looking chicken nuggets and you'd see the buns that just looked hard as a rock. I wouldn't want any part of that. It's absolutely disgusting. And especially when you consider some kids, as sad as it is to say, here in the United States, the only food they eat is the food they have at school. There are kids, many kids in this country who have no food at home, no access to food. When they go to school, that is the only food they get. Can you imagine being one of these kids and going to school? The only food you get is that slop? That's awful. Mary says, I believe Sean Duffy has a daughter with Down syndrome. Yes, he does. He and his wife, Rachel, they absolutely do. Sarah, kids still won't eat the healthier food because all they know is pizza, chicken nuggets at home. Kids are used to that and won't magically start eating healthy food when presented to them. I agree. But I do think that there are ways where you can make healthy food seem appetizing to kids. There are healthy ways to make chicken nuggets, that don't look like the ones that Michelle Obama was forcing on these kids. There's healthy ways to make, let's say, a hamburger or, a chicken sandwich. There are healthier ways of doing things than the slop that we've been serving at school. I think there are ways to, we see parents doing it at home. I make healthy things, at home. They could easily translate over to school. Now, it might cost more money. It very well might cost more money to make sure that these kids have a healthy school, breakfast, lunch, snack program, but it absolutely has to be done. Now, see, if somebody told me that my tax dollars were going to pay for kids to get a better, better school lunch, better school breakfast, I would be 100% for that. But do I want to spend my tax dollars on transgendered mice in any country? No, I don't. Much better off to go to the kids and to the special needs programs. Jay says, as someone with kids, they will eat if they are hungry, and they are always hungry. Maybe, I don't know. When I was a kid, I would have never have eaten that slop if they would, the Michelle Obama lunches, if they served it at my school. And Mary, I always like to mash potatoes with ground beef and gravy over it. And that gravy, we call that gravy train, but I liked it. Yeah, it's kind of like maybe like a bowl, like a mashed potato bowl. It kind of sounds like. Michelle, good morning, Michelle. And Kimberly, beef stew and those hot rolls. Yeah, I mean, there are there are ways to make beef stew perfectly healthy. That's certainly something you can do. My crazy right now, and I'm not really sure what's going on, but hopefully we'll get it fixed. So what do you think about this? Is George Floyd still alive? I don't think so. Todd says, I delivered to Procter and Gamble. All you see is chemical trucks being delivered. I know. Our food supply really is nothing but an arm of Monsanto. If when you really think about it, baby food's made literally in a lab. It's called Abbott Labs. Literally made in a lab. Our food is full of chemicals, full of pesticides, genetically modified to create more food with less nutritional value. So we've got a lot of work to do in this country, a lot of work to do on our food system, no question about it. And I'm probably most excited about that out of anything that Donald Trump is doing, outside of deportations, arrests, and well, we're not saying arrests because there really haven't been many arrests, but I'm most excited about the revamp in our country of our food programs. I can't wait to see the day when the grocery stores have had to modify the foods and we have no more appeal, no more chemicals, bromide, what is it, potassium bromide that's in our bread products. You can't eat that stuff. How many people, probably you, I know people, in my family, people I know eat it, where you go to the store and you buy commercial bread, and then guess what happens? It's full of potassium bromide. I just can't talk today. And we know Representative Anna Paulina Luna has discussed it at great length, the health risks from potassium bromide being in your baked goods and bread products, but yet we continue to keep buying it. And I've made fresh bread. I have a bread making machine. I've made bread by hand. People say, well, it doesn't taste the same as the grocery store because people are so used to the bread you get off the shelf at the grocery store that real homemade bread doesn't taste right to them. Just like cakes, people are so used to a box cake that when you make a real cake, it doesn't taste right to them. Doesn't mean it's not right. It just doesn't taste right because people get used to certain things. Somebody says, take the money from the failing Department of Education and put it into school lunches. So much money. If you think about all the money that's been wasted. What was it? Pete Hegseth this weekend said $530 million, he's recovered and stopped from funding these different programs. I mean, we could have the healthiest lives, healthiest children, healthiest food ever. But when are they going to start subsidizing the average American family to have a garden, to plant fruit trees, plant berries? When is that going to happen? I would love to see the government pay people to have their own garden at home and to grow their own food. I think that would be absolutely fantastic. And let's see, Jay says, our community had a big German influence, and once a month, your comment scrolled up. Let me go back and find it. And once a month, they served sauerkraut. I skipped lunch on that day. I would too. I absolutely despise sauerkraut. My stepdad used to make it, and the entire house would smell like it. It was absolutely disgusting. Todd says maybe they should bring the George Foreman grill back and grill clean pieces of chicken breast. Yeah, if they take all the Teflon off of it, that's just poisoning us too. And Mary, I use Ezekiel bread. Ezekiel bread is a good bread. And the reason why it's good, they keep it in the freezer, because if they didn't keep it in the freezer, it would spoil. When you go to the grocery store and you see all of that bread out on the shelves that can sit there for 2 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that's not healthy for you. That is absolutely not healthy. When you make fresh bread at home, guess what? It might last a day or two, and that's it. That's what healthy is. That's what healthy bread. Ezekiel bread is some of the best bread made. No question about it. They've got some, I haven't bought it in a long time, but I used to buy this bread that they made with live grains, to where they would sprout the grains and include it in the bread. And it's all that was in the bread was seeds and grains, and that was it. They made an entire loaf of bread out of it. And of course you have to keep it in the freezer because it's real. It'll spoil if you leave it out. And Jay, sorry, but I love Wonder Bread. Jay, you and everyone else. And that's I'm not saying you're a problem, but people have gotten so used to eating these commercialized baked goods that when they have the real thing, it doesn't taste right. And Kimberly, box cake is gross. I think box cake has its place, but cake in general is bad. I wasn't going to talk about this yet because I was going to talk about, I almost said George Foreman. Oh my goodness, George Floyd. which we are going to talk about George Floyd in a minute. But I do want to throw something out there since we're talking about food. As some of you know, I'm going to get that PET scan tomorrow. And so, just like I would do anytime I get any type of procedure done, I always look into it. And I've talked about this a little bit in the show in the past. I've looked into it a little bit more. And it goes to show how bad, reading the research on the PET scan goes to show really how bad sugar is for your body. Sugar is poison. It is absolutely poison. I know we all like sugar. God knows I do. Everyone likes sugar, but people are addicted to sugar. There's no question about it. And sugar feeds cancer. Sugar feeds inflammation. It feeds COVID. It feeds us all these different disease processes. And it's probably the worst thing that, and I don't know about pure cane sugar. I don't know, but I know the processed sugar. But I would think even pure cane sugar would be the same. But when you go and get a PET scan, the way that it works is that the day before, like today, I can't have any sugar at all. Absolutely none. Nothing with sugar in it. Completely low carb. All I can eat today would be meats, pure meats, whole meats, whatever you want to call it, cheese, hard cheeses, not the soft, farm cheeses. And I think like green beans and broccoli. I mean, eggs. There's only a couple of things you can have the day before the PET scan. And the reason why, they want all the sugar out of your body, all of it. Absolutely all of it. And you have to drink a lot of water, which also shows the importance of water, because water keeps your blood moving through your body from being stagnant. It keeps your blood moving. Water is so important to drink every day. And then the reason why you can't have any sugar is because when they do the PET scan, what they do is they attach these what they call tracers. It's some type of radioactive dye that they put into the sugar mixture. So then they give you a sugar mixture with this dye in it, this radioactive material, a tracer they call it, into your system. Well, guess what happens? They do this because they're trying to detect malignancies, and guess where the sugar goes? It goes straight to the malignancies, and then they can see how it interacts, and it lights up on the screen when it causes this metabolic reaction. And then you start thinking about it. Okay, well, sugar goes straight to the cancer cells, and that's where you see that metabolic activity. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, I don't think I will ever eat sugar again, knowing what it does to the body, which you already know, we all know. But reading how these PET scans work and how the sugar interacts with cancer cells is just absolutely mind-blowing to me, mind-blowing. And let's see, Jay says, I remember going to the day-old store as a kid with my mom. Me too, Jay. My family, we had an old deep freezer at our house in Chicago, and growing up, and in that deep freezer, we would go to those Hostess outlets, and our entire deep freezer, speaking of sugar, would be filled with like frozen ding dongs and different kinds of little Hostess cakes. They were always, for any time we could go out in the freezer and grab these little cakes out. I got kind of surprised we didn't eat more of them, quite honestly, knowing that they were out there. Todd says a McDonald's hamburger bun can survive for 2 years. Actually, probably longer. Probably longer, Todd. I've seen, there was a woman on some kind of show where she had a Happy Meal or something like that she'd had for, I don't even know how long, over 20 years. Pretty crazy to think about it. And Jay says it's not sugar so much as it is the amount of sugar we get. And that's probably true. Anything in moderation is probably fine. And Jay says our last car, thanks to the kids, probably had 10-year-old fries under the seats. I think everyone has cleaned out their car and found an old French fry that's probably been there since the beginning of existence. And they still look exactly the same. And I bet if you took it in the house and put it in an air fryer, it would crisp up just like it was brand new today, which is really scary. Margie says aspartame or saccharin. I probably wouldn't choose either one of them. When I try to choose a sweetener, I like the monk fruit sweetener. There's people who claim it's not good for you either. But some of that stuff, man, it's just bad. Some people use stevia. There's people who claim it's bad. It's like, really, what is the truth? What's good for you and what's bad for you? I guess I'm about to find out. Hopefully my test will be good and I don't have to worry about it. Let's see. Todd says Simple Mills I buy a lot of Simple Mills products. Simple Mills makes a good breakfast bar with limited ingredients and no chemicals. I did not know that Simple Mills had a breakfast bar, but I bought their crackers and their pizza dough mix and some things like that. Mary says, choose real sugar over chemicals any day. Todd says Schnucks has it. I had no idea. Yeah, I always choose real sugar. I try to buy like pure cane sugar when I can. I try not to use sugar or eat sugar or have any part of sugar. That's always my plan. Here lately, I feel like I've lived on yogurt, and depending on the yogurt, yogurt's not always good either. I try to buy the low, low sugar, no added sugar, low carb, non-fat yogurt. It's like by the time you do all that, is there actually any real yogurt in it? I don't know. I think I'm thinking about making my own yogurt because I do like yogurt. It's so good for you for your system. And like you guys, some of you may or may not know this. I've talked about it a couple times where I took so much of the what is the ivermectin after COVID, began. Not too much, not too much, just an average amount regularly to keep myself healthy and to cleanse myself of parasites. But nobody told me how to take a probiotic with it. So I ended up with all these crazy stomach ulcers. So if you take ivermectin or an anti-parasitic or do a parasite cleanse, be sure to add in the good bacteria because that stuff kills all the bacteria, the good and the bad. So if you don't add in a probiotic, you will end up with some serious problems like I did. So don't do that. But make sure when you're eating your healthy stuff to add in those probiotics, put those good elements back in your system. So I try to eat a lot of yogurt now to kind of keep the goodness going. And Ruth says also freezing bread reduces something. Anyone recall what carbs? I don't know. Would I don't know. I know that I don't know. I know that it can kill any kind of parasites and things like that when you freeze it. Brown sugar is unrefined and honey is natural. Yeah, honey at any chance you can use honey. I buy raw honey, that Manuka raw honey, and that's some pretty good stuff. Annette, I take a lot of supplements. I do my homework and what to buy. Antioxidants are very important. And Karen says, "Oh, have a good day. Have a good." Thank you, Karen. And so, as a matter of fact, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, as some of you know, because I've got to go get that PET scan done. But I will be here on Wednesday with Colonel Joe Adams, and I'm going to show a video to you guys about how to make your own hydroxychloroquine. I think that's so interesting. We all have to do what we have to do to be healthier, and there's just we're all. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of like at the base level of trying to be healthier. I've got my seeds started. Last year I did the same thing. I am hell bent on growing my own vegetables. And, I bought all of these fruit trees to plant outside. I've bought so many berry plants. I just bought more berry plants this weekend. I'm going to do every single thing I can to try to have anything I can harvest or forage on my own property to where I only have to go to a butcher to buy meat. That's my goal in life. I don't want to have to buy anything from the grocery store. I'm not going to raise a cow or a pig or anything else. And my chickens are for eggs. I'm not going to be butchering my chickens. And so I would really like to make sure that here at the house, I grow all the vegetables I can eat, all the fruits, all the berries, all the plants, and then just have to go to the butcher for some good, clean cuts of meat. That's my goal. I'm working on it every day, every single day. Linda says, how do you get ivermectin? Believe it or not, I ordered the horse paste off of Amazon. And it is just as good as anything else you can get out there, whether it's pills or liquids, just as good as the prescription stuff. It kept me healthy and safe all throughout the COVID, completely safe. I was perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know I had COVID. Just at the radio station, we went and got tested just for fun, just to see. And I had antibodies already and yet never even knew I had it. So it definitely works. And I believe it works for cancer too. There's a lot of studies that prove that. I got to be very careful saying these things because they will delete this show just as fast as you can imagine. Peggy, have you heard why you need a PET scan? I think freezing bread reduces gluten. Oh, Peggy, I have shared. The reason why I need a PET scan is, and I'll go over it again. So since we're talking about it, then I've got a couple other things to talk about before we head out. But I'm getting a PET scan because when I was in Georgia, getting out the vote for Donald Trump, I was having a hard time breathing. I just thought that was allergies or something. So I came home. My doctor ordered a CT scan. They saw that I had two nodules in my lungs and at that time, two swollen lymph nodes. And so they said, the radiologist said, well, we can't exclude neoplasm. So we'll have to have you come back in 3 months and get another CT scan. Well, it took my doctor forever to order another one. I ended up going back to Georgia for a little bit and then then when that project was over, I came home. And then ended up getting the other scan back on March the 10th. And at that time, not only did I have the two, nodules, but I grew a whole nother one. And one lymph node either went away or just wasn't seen on that scan. But the other lymph node was still, it was the right paratracheal lymph node was still swollen. And so that time, the radiologist said, we really need to consider some type of malignancy or metastasis. I know I'm not saying that word right. And so now I have to go back for a PET scan. Now, granted, I'm talking about it. I'm not upset about it or worried about it even slightly. I absolutely do not think it's going to show anything at all. 90% or more of lung nodules are absolutely nothing. They usually go away by the next scan. And I really do think whatever it is, mine are is probably, an infection. It could be part of asthma or any other type of thing, maybe autoimmune. I absolutely do not think it's any type of malignancy. So I'm sure I will get good results back. I'm not worried about it at all. More than anything, what I'm excited about is that I get to get a PET scan. I think every person should get a PET scan if you can. You can go out and pay for one out of pocket for about $1,500, but I think it's something everyone should get because guess what? When you get a PET scan, then you can walk away from it knowing that you don't. Most people don't have any kind of malignancy. You can walk away from it thinking, okay, my body is cancer free. I can go on about my life. And that's how I feel is going to be me tomorrow. I'm going to get my report back and be like, oh, everything's fine. Follow up in 6 months or a year. So I'm not overly worried about it. So many things cause swollen lymph nodes. So many things cause lung nodules. I'm not even slightly concerned with it. But I think it'll be, I like the experience of doing it just to do it. Something different to do that I've not done before. So here's some of the things that we don't have too much more time that I'm going to get over very quickly here. And that is that I thought this was kind of funny. You guys may or may not think it's as funny as I do. And I hope I saved the video. I was having some problems with my videos uploading this morning. Darn it, and I don't see it. I don't know why sometimes my system.
الكثير من وسائل الإعلام قد عاد إلى الحياة وهو يقاتل مع القوات الروسية في كورسك. فأن جورج فلويد.
I'm going to stop that for a second. Oh. I'm going to stop that for a second. I didn't even mean to play it yet anyway. So what this was so funny. There's this Arab news station who absolutely believes that George Floyd was never killed. It's kind of funny because you know how we all talk about conspiracy stuff. Well, apparently we're not the only ones. And they're saying that they believe that George Floyd is actually fighting in Russia against Ukraine, which is maybe one of the craziest things I've ever heard, but you can watch this little clip video here. I don't even think that looks like George Floyd.
جورج فلويد الذي حسب الكثير من وسائل الإعلام قد عاد إلى الحياة وهو يقاتل مع القوات الروسية في كورسك. نشاهد كيف أن جورج فلويد المزعوم وهو يقاتل مع القوات الروسية في كورسك، ودرجة الشبه بينه وبين جورج فلويد صورته الحقيقية. كثيرون تحدثوا على أنه عميل روسي قد ساهم في زعزعة الأوضاع في أمريكا، والآن هو عاد إلى روسيا ويقاتل هناك.
They are very serious about that. They're very serious. They really think that that could be George Floyd. I think it's pretty funny. Is George Floyd alive? No. Not in my opinion. Absolutely not. And if he were alive, he definitely wouldn't be over in Russia fighting against Ukraine. So I think we can pretty much clear that conspiracy theory up pretty darn quick. So, something else I wanted to get into really quick before we run out of time is we all talk about the weapons that go to Ukraine. And by the way, right now today, we have both officials from Ukraine, officials from Russia, officials from the United States meeting in Riyadh to try to finally work out a peace deal. I don't see a peace deal ever coming to fruition, but they're trying to work out a peace deal. Donald Trump wants his peace deal done by April 20th. That's his deadline, April 20th. And I don't know that Zelensky being backed by the European Union will ever consider a peace deal with Russia. I really don't. I think the only way that's going to happen, like I've said many times before, is if they get rid of Zelensky altogether. I don't think that this is going to work out very successfully, but I hope that it does for a lot of different reasons. And in the meantime, while they're working out this peace deal, of course, Ukraine continues to attack Russia. Then Russia retaliates back and attacks Ukraine. It just never seems to end. But we know we've sent them, $350 billion over to Ukraine. We've sent them all these weapons, and we're always saying, well, where do the weapons go? Well, there are some new reports about exactly where those weapons are turning up. None of this will surprise you at all. None of it surprised me. It says in mid-2022, Interpol and Europol warned that arms aid could end up in the hands of organized crime. Imagine that, based partly on the precedent of the 1990s Yugoslav wars. Now, when I'm going through these, I want you to remember that we as the United States have funded the wars in other countries for a very long time through a proxy. I kind of feel like Ukraine was serving as that proxy for us in a lot of these instances where now we're sending these weapons over to Ukraine, they disappear. Some of them being sold on the black market. A lot of them are ending up in the hands of these different organizations in various countries, causing instability and war. No surprise there. Says they were right, with police in Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands sounding the alarm about huge quantities of military-grade weapons flowing into Europe. No surprise. In 2022, Sputnik dark web investigation uncovered Ukraine-based arms dealer ready to ship M4 rifles to Yemen. Now look at what's going on in Yemen via intermediaries in Poland and Portugal. Other inquirers found everything from Javelin missiles to advanced drones being sold online. Of course, they're going to end up in Yemen, and they're going to end up in Syria and Afghanistan and with the cartels. And then in December of 2022, Nigeria's president warned that arms from Ukraine were beginning to filter through the Lake Chad Basin area into the hands of militants. And guess what? Terrorists. Can you imagine that? 2023, it ended up in the hands of Polish authorities, recovered some of these weapons being sold on the black market in Poland. 2024, a DoD Inspector General's Office report found the U.S. failed to properly track 1 billion plus in hardware sent to Ukraine, 40,000 items missing, delinquent. And then also in 2024, the Global Initiative Against Transitional Organized Crime revealed that Ukrainian arms resellers were pawning off not just trophies like small arms and grenades, but heavy weapons. 1 ton Azu 23 to, I don't know, some type of 23 millimeter anti-aircraft gun, M340s, machine guns, and automatic grenade launchers. No surprise. Are you surprised by that? I'm not surprised by that at all. But I just don't know who it is that's doing this. Is it Ukraine? Are we sending all these weapons to Ukraine and they're turning around and making a profit on these weapons? Or are we using Ukraine as a proxy? We're sending it all to Ukraine and with a wink, wink. Well, we really want you to make these arms deals with Yemen. We want you to make these arms deals with the Houthis. We want you to make these arms deals over in Yugoslavia. What exactly is happening? How complicit was the Joe Biden administration in all of this, the arming of these different terrorists and organized crime units across the world? I think we all have the answer, don't we? I mean, we could probably all guess. And I think Zelensky just he took a little kickback for making these deals happen. I really think that's just my opinion, but I think that's exactly what happened. I thought it was kind of interesting too this weekend. I'm not going to play the video of it because we're about out of time, but Trump has I can't remember his first name, Witkoff, who's been he's in Riyadh today. He has been very front center in these peace deals between Ukraine and in Russia. So he was over in Russia and he gave a very interesting statement. He said that when he talked to Putin, not only did Putin have this beautiful painting made for Donald Trump and presented it to him, but he also told Witkoff that, hey, when I heard about the attempted assassination that day in Butler, Pennsylvania, he said, I went to my church and I prayed for Donald Trump because Donald Trump, not because he could potentially become the president of the United States, I prayed for him because he is my friend, because I care about his life. And so it's crazy to think that Putin would take, time out of his crazy day. He would go to his church and make that special time to pray for Donald Trump's life. I thought that was kind of touching. And Witkoff stated that he went back and told, of course, Donald Trump. He presented him with the painting, and he said that Donald Trump was quite teary-eyed over the whole situation and, was very touched by not only Putin commissioning this painting for him, but also praying for his life, as his friend. I thought that was, just a very interesting statement. But one more thing I want to show you guys just really quick before we go. We can talk about this more another day because we're running out of time. But I thought this was interesting because, back in the day, people met through, relationships began through friends, family, so I was looking at this study from 1930 till 2024 and how it changed, how people came together and who they met, how it transitioned. I'm going to show you this little video clip, how it transitioned from people meeting their significant other through friends, through family, all the way up to now it's all online. It's kind of scary, and I'm going to tell you why I'm showing this to you. Let's take a look at this. It's kind of a neat little graph here. Do you see where that ended? 60% of couples have met online as of 2024. 60%. You saw family at the very top back in 1930, which went all the way down to the bottom. Online continue to grow. Now, I'm single. I don't date at all. Absolutely no one. You guys are really the only people I know and talk to these days because all I do is work and do this show. But I think it's pretty interesting. And I know me, myself, I would never in a million years date online or be on one of those online dating sites. That would just never be me. If I meet someone, it has to be in person. There has to be something about them that I like, whatever weird thing it might be. But I can't, it makes me wonder about relationships now. And is that the reason why so many relationships don't last or don't work out? Because people are meeting each other online. But that's not really the point of me talking about this. The point of me bringing this up is I thought that it was interesting that online just completely took over 60% of couples meeting online. Now, what's the next big thing? Because everything comes in fads. So right now, let's say 60% of couples are meeting online. If you could figure out what that next thing will be to take over that graph, boy, you'd make an awful lot of money. How will people in the future meet? How will they date? How will they move on in relationships if they're not meeting online? Or will it always be online? And just will be, will AI get in the mix? How will all of that work out? I thought that was pretty interesting to see that. And let's see. Joe says, sad. Look at the family one that was definitely organized by someone. I think people were way better off when they met through family connections. There's no question about that. And Joe says, probably our government. Probably, absolutely. I don't doubt that at all. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I wanted to kind of throw that out there. At one point, I may still do it, but there's a guy that I know who wanted to do a segment on the show about relationships. And it was kind of a he-she type perspective of dating. And I think it's kind of funny. His perspective cracks me up all the time. He is absolutely convinced that there is no such thing as organic dating anymore, that women are only looking for material things and financial stability. So he said that's why we see all these young, beautiful girls, with these older men, for the financial stability and the money. And I used to call it dating for dollars. I've only dated poor people, so mostly poor people. So I don't know about that. But anyway, a story for another day. I think it would be pretty interesting, though, to have a segment about relationships. We'll have to all talk about that another time. Pam, we are trending back to traditional ways. Absolutely so, Pam. What happened to the days where, people met each other in church? I don't even know if church was even on that graph. Back in the day, a lot of people did meet at church. So those are some things to think about. But either way, that is it for me today. I've got to run. I'm 8 minutes over my timeline, even though I started late. I still have to run off to work. I do hope you guys all have a really great day. Just a reminder, I will not be here tomorrow. I will be here on Wednesday with Colonel Joe Adams. and can't wait to see him. So much to talk about with Colonel Adams this week and more unfolding by the minute. I do hope you guys have a really fantastic day. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. We'll see you all on Wednesday.